So, the movie kicks off with this total weirdo, Shin, trying to beat a game that's gone full-on real-life death trap, like, no logging out, ever. He's fighting his butt off, right? And eventually he runs into the super unlucky final boss, Gatekeeper Origin. Shin totally slays the boss, hoping it'll set all the other players free. But nope, turns out, this poor dude can't log out either. And then, bam, a gate opens right behind him, blinding him with light. Fast forward 500 years. Yeah, you heard that right, 500 years. And he wakes up in some random field. He pulls up his stats window and freaking out, because his stats are way better now. He's like, whoa, is this from that title I got for beating the boss? But then he tries to chill, thinking, okay, if I beat the game, I can log out, right? Except this loser can't even find the dang logout button. He even tries checking for other players, but nothing pops up because he's totally offline. He's all, the game wouldn't let me move if it was still the game, but he can move his arms and legs just fine. So now he's wondering if this is actually real life. He starts screaming and rolling around on the ground like a total scumbag. Then, he's like, okay, this ain't gonna get me anywhere. So he uses some bird magic item to find his home base. On the way, he sees this massive wall and castle, and he's like, when the heck did these get built? He finally gets home and finds these totally useless scumbags harassing this young girl because she won't spill the tea on where her master is. They try to grab her, but they hit this invisible barrier before they run into this huge, ugly monster. The loudmouth idiots get super scared and bail, leaving the girl standing right there. The big, ugly monster tries to get the girl, but Shin totally takes it out, leaving it lying on the ground like a headless chicken. The girl blinks, and it's all over. The girl brings him in and thanks him for saving her. She introduces herself as Tira Lucent, and he says he's Shin. Tira asks if he knows her master, since he just said her name, but our dimwit Shin has no idea what she's talking about. Tira, on the other hand, is shocked that Shin doesn't know Shni Rezar, the acting shopkeeper of the Moon Sanctum. After a lot of head-scratching, he can only think of a lady named Shni, who was one of his support characters. Long story short, he asks where her master is, but she won't tell him, because they literally just met, and those jerks were looking for the same thing. Then she tells him she can send a message to her master, since that's her job, looking after the store and sending messages. Oh, and each message costs 1,000 jewels. Right before she can say anything else, he pulls out a gold jail coin from his magic item box and hands it to her. Tira is totally flabbergasted. Like, how does a regular person like Shin have something so valuable, usually only owned by kings and super old members of rare species? It's also a magic boosting item. To Tira, a gold jail is worth at least 10 billion jewels, but to Shin, it's like the smallest coin in the game. Tira asks him who he is, and he just says he's an ordinary adventurer, and his species is high human. She tells him that high humans went extinct and disappeared during the Dusk of Prosperity, this huge historical event where high humans and a bunch of other people vanished 500 years ago. So, yeah, that just means the world is 500 years after the game ended. Shin thanks her, hands her the coin again, and says he's looking forward to getting to know her. Tira, who's never seen this kind of wealth, is super surprised that he actually wants to give it to her, but she takes it, and she's low-key stoked to finally hold a gold jail coin, something she'd only dreamed of. Shin tells her it could be useful since elves use magic. He also adds that she's a beautiful, black-haired, golden-eyed elf, but she doesn't believe him, saying it's just an illusion her master put on her to hide her real identity. Then she tells him that her black hair brings bad luck. Monsters would attack her village all the time because of it, and she got kicked out until her master rescued her. Her master created that barrier earlier, and she's been safe in it for 100 years. Shin figures those useless scumbags in Tira were attacked because of this curse. He asks if there's a way to break it, and she says not yet, but her master is looking into it. However, the crybaby admits she's fine, as long as she can live without bothering anyone, even if she can't leave the barrier. Shin asks if her hair has always been black, and she says it used to be silver until it suddenly turned black when she got cursed one day. Shin thinks for a few seconds about what that could be. Then he opens his game window to look for it, and finally sees Cursed Gift. Tira has a randomly occurring curse called Cursed Gift, which is why her hair changes color, and monsters attack her. So, he tries to remove the curse with his powers, and only a tiny bit of her hair changes back. But she feels amazing, better than great, to at least see her real hair again after 100 years. Then, he tells her to try going outside the barrier and promises to take down any monsters that show up. Even though she's a little scared, she tries it, and nothing happens after a long walk through the forest. Tears stream down her face. She's so relieved to see the clear sky and feel the weather. Tira thanks Shin, and he's pretty happy he could help too. She tells him her master won't be back for a while and asks what he's gonna do now. Shin says he wants to check out a nearby town. He's curious and wants to learn more about the world. He wants to know if his other support characters are around too, since Shni, Tira's master, is. Tira suggests a nearby town like Bayrelik Kingdom, which he might want to visit, and she gives him a letter of introduction that'll let him skip inspections. Shin wonders if she's really gonna give something like that to someone she just met. She thinks he deserves it, considering he lifted her curse and he seems capable and good-natured. A few moments later, Tira says she'll let him know when her master's back, and he finally heads off to Bayrelik Kingdom. He makes it to the kingdom, and lucky for him, he gets to skip a super long line because of that letter. Some random guy tells Shin that the letter is also like an id that can get him an audience with the king, so he'd better not lose it. The guy walks him to an adventurer's guild, and then leaves. Shin figures he can start gathering info there, so he goes in. He meets the guild's attendant and tells her he wants to register as an adventurer. She points him to where they accept applications. When he gets there, he meets a lady who looks just like a copy of the first attendant, and the young lady quickly introduces herself as Silica. Turns out, the first attendant is her older twin sister, Celica. Then, he pays the fee and fills out a form to create a guild card, which takes almost the whole day. Next, we see Shin at the guild's restaurant, waiting for his food. He notices the armor on other customers, made of leather or iron, and can tell it's way lower quality than what they had in the game. A few moments later, the old bad named Celica serves him his food, and he's surprised to see her in the kitchen. Well, Celica claims she helps out when she's not too busy. Shin eats, and the food tastes good. Then she says she's here to confirm what she heard, and she whispers in his ear that she heard he has a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Shin acknowledges it. She asks if she can verify its authenticity, and he tells her it'll be after he's done eating. Then, a super buff guy with 2 scar marks on his face, who looks like a bodybuilder, shows up and introduces himself as Barlux Heim, the guild master. In a super private room, Barlux is all like, gotta check if this letter is for real, yo. So he pulls out another intro letter, puts it next to Shin's, and bam, they light up and vibe together, proving Shin's letter is totally legit. Shin then spills the tea, saying Tira hooked him up with it. The guildmaster, being the cool dude he is, explains all the stuff Tira probably forgot to mention. He's like, this letter? It's basically a VIP pass. Most nations will just wave you through. All the guilds respect it, and you can even snag a meeting with the king in places like Bayrelik. Basically, it's a super trusted id, and a seriously powerful item to have. But, and this is a big but, tons of shady characters try to swipe it. The guildmaster then offers Shin a way out, telling him he can totally destroy the letter right there in the guild if he's too scared to protect it. But Shin? Nah, he's got this. He's confident he can protect it, and besides, he's not gonna let Tira down after she trusted him with something so important. The meeting wraps up with a solid handshake, and the guildmaster's looking forward to seeing what Shin can do. After a seriously long day, Shin crashes at an inn, just wishing tomorrow would hurry up so he can finally get his guild card and level up. The next day, he wakes up, but of course the worthless asshole isn't waking up in the real world. Classic. Anyway, he heads to the guild and Celica immediately compliments his new threads. He totally blushes, but he's thinking, dude, a bottom-ranked adventurer shouldn't look this fancy. She hands him his shiny new guild card, explaining that there are 9 adventurer ranks, from SNS all the way down to G. She tells him he'll rack up points for finishing jobs to rank up. Oh, and he can only take jobs that are up to 2 ranks higher than his own. Shin, being all eager, immediately points out the first job he wants from the board, harvesting hilt grass. Celica says it's super in demand for potions, so there's no time limit. As the weirdo walks out, Celica's just thinking about how strange he is, not showing off even though Barlux clearly saw his mad skills. 3 hours of hunting for hilt grass later, he's wondering why he hasn't found a single one. Bro thought this was gonna be easy. Shin decides to chill out a bit, figuring most monsters around here are probably weak enough for low-rank weapons anyway. Moments later, his map goes off like crazy, showing a monster moving super fast. And wouldn't you know it, it's a level 359 Skullface Jack, rocking a light-type sword and a beefy shield. Then he spots a wrecked wagon a little ways before the monster, so he knows it's been on a rampage, even if it looked kinda weird on his map. Shin tries to land a quick hit, but the Skullface Jack is ridiculously fast, blocking and dodging his attacks. His sword seems to do nothing, so he unleashes his limit-off power and bam, slashes the thing. The massive monster crumbles and vanishes, leaving a sweet gemstone for Shin, while its sword just flings into the air and flies away. Shin's starting to feel like he's figuring out his strength, and maybe this game is actually getting fun. Meanwhile, that light-type sword comes crashing through the castle's window, making everyone think His Highness just got attacked. Lady Ryo, the princess of the castle, immediately tells the guards to snag an appraiser, like yesterday, to figure out what the sword's made of, and who launched it into the castle. And back to Shin, he finds his way back to the kingdom and sees a crowd gathered around 4 injured people. He asks the same guy who escorted him into the kingdom what the heck happened, and the guy tells him that 12 people got jumped in the woods by a skullface, but only 4 made it out alive. Yup, that must have been the wrecked wagon Shin saw earlier. Witnesses are also buzzing about seeing a sword fly out of the woods and smash into the castle, but thankfully, nobody got hurt. Then, the guy asks if Shin knows anything about it, and Shin's quick with a, nope, just harvesting hilt grass. The guy then tells him to spill if anything comes to mind, because the big wigs have him on the case. Shin seems pretty relieved that no one in the castle got hurt. He swings by the guild to report in and finds everyone talking about the skullface. He reports to Celica that he totally took down the skullface and even snagged a gemstone. He tells her the monster was unique, wielding a huge sword, and it even shattered his blade. Based on Celica's reaction, Shin's clearly trying to make her blush when an elf lady pops in, telling the useless bad to lay off her colleague. The elf lady introduces herself as Els. Celica then whispers to her that Shin defeated the skullface Jack, but Els is just not buying it. Shin mentions he couldn't bring the monster with him because the skullface's gear was super lame. Els tells him he'd he'd need either a B rank or a small fortune to get his hands on Jack-level gear. Even though Shin sounds like he's barely an adventurer, she takes the gemstone to check if it's got the Skullface Jack's mana. Then, he asks Els if Skullfaces pop up often in the northern woods, and she explains that undead are born when mana mixes with the leftover grudges of fallen people, and since the northern woods are packed with brutal monsters, there's no shortage of folks who've kicked the bucket there. Shin also mentions that this Skulljack is unique because it's level 359. Els tells Celica to use the gem to figure out the monster's strength while she handles the front desk. After Celica dips, Els tells Shin that if he's right about the monster's level, he's at least as strong as an A-rank party all by himself. Seeing that Els is clued in, Shin quickly tells her to keep it on the down low, just between them. From there, Shin heads to a restaurant, and guess who shows up this time? Celica. He asks her if her twin sister, Celica, works there too, and she's like, yup. Then, she brings him a drink and asks if she can chill at his table. Moments later, a tall, ripped dude just struts up to Shin's table and sits right in front of him. Shin's totally staring, wondering who this guy is. Shin recognizes the ripped guy's magic spear, a legendary weapon called Venom, but then the guy quickly introduces himself. The ripped guy says he's Wilhelm Avis, and he can totally tell Shin's a new adventurer because his name doesn't even faze him. Shin asks what he's done to scare people, and Wilhelm tells him folks call him Wilhelm the Vampire because he hunts so many undead. Shin, being Shin, thinks it's just because of his pale skin. Hearing this, everyone around starts pitying the unlucky weirdo, thinking he's got a death wish. Wilhelm then tells Shin that the real reason is Venom's draining ability. It can suck out its victim's life force and transfer it to him. Right on cue, Celica arrives with food for both of them, and they dig in. Next up, Shin hits the library, hoping to learn more about this world. He finds the records of the Bayrelicht Kingdom, which was founded 511 years ago, and he remembers Tira mentioning that the Dusk of Prosperity happened 500 years ago, so he figures it's all around the same time. He keeps digging until he finds a page with people from this world that are the same as the in-game races. Back at the castle, Barlux and the Big Shots decide to have a super secret meeting to talk about the sword and the monster mess. Barlux reports that the Slayer only came back with the gem, which they're checking out right now. One of the castle peeps wonders why the Slayer didn't grab the Skullface's sword or armor, and a lady says the alleged Slayer just wasn't impressed by it. The guy also reports that the appraisal confirmed the gem is level 369. Barlux then suggests they seriously look into whether there are similar monsters chilling in the woods. The first guy says that level puts the monster on par with a king, and the other lady chimes in that she's already sent out investigators to look into it. Barlux adds that Skullfaces get active at night, so he warns the knights to stay alert. The guy asks about the Skullface's weird gear and the person who defeated it. Barlux immediately says he can only spill about the weapon, but the Slayer wants to keep their identity totally secret. The guy mentions that some people think the sword crashing into the castle and the Skullface getting taken down are connected, since it all happened on the same day. Barlux asks him what kind of sword it is, and the guy tells Barlux to keep it hush-hush before he describes the light-type sword. He says the sword is like, comparable to, maybe even better than, their nation's royal sword, making it legendary. This just makes everyone even more curious about who the heck this idiot Slayer is. On a totally chill, sunny day, Shin's just vibing on a bench, munching on some food, when bam, a tiny girl just pops up, totally staring him down. What a creeper, right? Shin, being the nice guy, offers her some grub, and she snatches it up super fast. He's thinking, whoa, is this like a tiger beast girl or something? She doesn't look like a beggar, so he wonders if she's just lost. After she finishes her meal, she says thanks and introduces herself as Mill. He tells her his name too. Shin asks where she's headed, and then Wilhelm shows up. Mill points at Wilhelm and is like, he's here to get me. Both adventurers are totally surprised to run into each other again. Shin asks if Mille is Wilhelm's kid, and Wilhelm says she's one of the kids from the church orphanage, and he's actually looking for her. As they're about to split, Mille runs back to Shin and whispers in his ear to save the fox in the northern woods. Later that night, Shin's just pondering why she picked him for this mission, but then he realizes he needs to figure out how to get a hold of Schnee. He's hoping it's not some kind of death trap. The next day, he swings by Moon Sanctum to ask Tira if she recognizes a certain blade. She can only say it's an ancient sword. Shin then drops the bomb that it's her master's sword, Blue Moon. He explains that only its creators, himself and Schnee, or people they pick, can use it. Tira looks at the sword and is like, whoa, I'm scared it'll just swallow me whole if I hold it. Later on, she totally confesses that everything gets wild when he's around. Anyway, Shin apologizes and tells her that Blue Moon will actually tell him if Schnee remembers him or not, so she agrees to hold on to it. He also hands her 2 letters, which will help him know if she hears from Schnee. He tells her to just write the recipient's name and say, send. Tira asks why he can't do it himself, and he says he tried last night, but it just wouldn't work. She wonders if the cards will work instead. Shin quickly tries it out, and she confirms it does work. He just can't send them to Schnee. The cards only work if you've actually met the person in this world. Tira then asks if he can hook her up with some cards because she might need them to study magic items for her mage dreams. Shin suggests that it could cover the cost of sending a message, and she's totally on board. Then, he bounces, and our unlucky pal starts thinking about all the things she'd do with those cards. Shin then heads to the northern woods woods, having zero clue how to save this fox. As he pushes deeper, he starts hearing voices shouting, "Leave, leave!" He wonders if it's some kind of barrier, but then remembers he's beefed up his mental interference resistance, so it doesn't even faze him. Even though it's a super strong sign that something's up ahead, he keeps going until he reaches a shrine. The mental interference immediately stops. He keeps moving, and then he hears something shatter. He's like, what was that? But being the weirdo he is, he walks into the shrine and sees a tiny fox in a magic circle. He notices the fox is poisoned and cursed. He quickly scoops it up and heals it. Moments later, he hears a sound and checks his map, seeing tons of enemies. He steps outside to confront them. He whips out a spear and slices them all down in one epic blow. Then, he spots a couple of enemies that weren't on the map earlier and wonders what they are. Turns out, the two animal statues in the shrine transform into massive monsters. Both are invaded golems, level 674. Both enemies try to attack him, but he dodges like a pro. Then he first casts shadow binds to hold them still, and they create a miasma so he can't see them. He realizes the miasma is actually hurting the fox. He can't do anything because he can't pinpoint the enemy's location in the darkness. While he's wondering what to do, the fox makes a sound to direct them to the magical circle. From the circle, he can see through the mist and pinpoint the enemies. He then smashes them with his arc bind and cataclysmic strike power. After he totally demolishes the golems, the miasma vanishes, and the fox feels way better. Shin checks the fox's stats and sees it's an elemental, level 211. With how playful the fox is, he can tell it wants to come with him. Even though he's never seen an invaded golem with miasma and an elemental kitten before in the game, he thinks it could be a clue about how to get back to his own world. Meanwhile, Master Schnee gets a letter from Tira and is like, where did she even get this magic item? She checks the letter and sees her master's name, Shin, on it. Shin leaves the shrine, hoping to report to the guild when he gets to town, but he's not going to tell them about the elemental just yet. Then he tames the little fox, with the condition that he'll keep its level and species a secret. Then, he names it Yuzuha. A few moments later, he gets a message in his window from Tira, reporting that she sent her master a message, and she'll let him know when she hears back. She also asks if it's possible to attach items to cards and send them. He tells her to say hi to Schnee for him and then heads to the guild. He finds his way to the guild and reports to the two totally pervy twin sisters. These useless fools are trying to get his attention. He seems totally uninterested in their silliness, so he heads to the board to check out other jobs. He finds a skilled successor job needed at the orphanage next to a church in the westward. He takes the job since he'll get to see Millie alone that way. The next minute, he gets to the church orphanage and meets a woman. He asks to see Mill about something. Mill is so stoked to see him. She gives him a big hug. With how much Mill clearly likes him, the woman can tell he's a good person. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the woman introduces herself as Tria, the church's nun. With Tria's go-ahead, he asks Millie if this is the little fox she was talking about, and she says yes. She thanks him, and Shin tells Yuzuha to thank her too. Then, she asks the woman to tell him more about her requests. The woman tells him she's looking for someone who inherited certain skills, like Purify, so they can teach them to her. Shin wonders what she needs it for heal or cure. He then tells Tria that he can teach her, but it depends on her. Tria is about to talk about rewards when Shin quickly tells her he doesn't want any money. Instead, he'd like to know about Mille's power and wants her to share any information the church gets. Tria is speechless for a few seconds, thinking about his terms, until Mille says he's cool to go with. Then, she accepts his terms. Shin asks if anyone interesting comes to the church, and most importantly, he's super fascinated by the nature of Mille's power. Tria tells him that Mille possesses the Star Composer title and sometimes has unexpected visions, but they've never been wrong before. She can predict my future. Tria tells him that Millie might have asked him for help because she saw something to stop people from using it for evil. She's already told her associates to be careful who they mention Millie's power to. Then, she talks about Wilhelm, who helps them out, and that bad people steer clear of the children because they're scared of Wilhelm. Hearing this, Shin accepts the job, and she tells him that he'd be teaching another of their sisters to learn the Purify skill. Shin thinks it'd be Tria, and she says their former priest has a granddaughter, Lacia, and things would go smoother if she were to inherit the church. All the kids in the orphanage are having a blast playing with Yuzuha while Shin and Mille are sitting, watching the other kids. Then one of the sisters from the church comes over and asks if he's going to save them. Shin wonders if she means the kids or the nun, and she clarifies that the nun might get rid of the orphanage. She tells him that the church doesn't have the current priest, so a new one has to take over. Shin then asks why Tria can't do it, and she answers that it has to be someone who can use a special skill. Shin figures that's why she needs the Purify skill. She also says that the greedy and worthless jerk, the current priest, wants to get rid of the orphanage, and the former priest's daughter might have a stronger claim to the church. Shin asks her why a priest of the church would want to get rid of the orphanage, and she tells him they don't like him and that he's a pig who only cares about money. Immediately, Millie tells the sister that Shin will save them, and she feels super relieved to hear that. Then he asks the sister if Millie is usually right, and she answers yes. He then pats Mill's head, and she starts to blush. Moments later, Tria walks out of the church to call on Shin, and finds him under the tree with all the kids sleeping all over him. Tria introduces her sis Lacia to Shin, and basically tells him, hey, she's a little clumsy, but super dedicated. Shin's like, cool, I'll teach you the Purify skill, but it's all on you if you learn it. Then he asks where all the high-level undead hang out, and Tria's like, oh, the ghost plains are famous for that. Suddenly, Wilhelm pops in and recognizes Shin as the adventurer who took the quest. He immediately asks Shin what his deal is and what the sisters told him. Shin replies that they filled him in about Mill and the adventurer from the orphanage who helped keep her secret. Tria also chimes in that Shin's a good dude, and Millie even said it was okay. Wilhelm's like, if Millie says so, I trust ya. Shin's all, I won't spill any secrets or do anything shady, and Wilhelm instantly whips out his venom spear, pointing it at Shin and basically threatening to end him if he does. Even though they apologize for Wilhelm's impatient attitude, they kinda give him a bad, like, super harsh review. Shin explains to them that Leisha needs to defeat 200 undead, over level 150, while holding a prayer orb to get the Purify skill. Leisha's like, this is gonna take forever. To help her out, Shin says he'll weaken the monsters, and Leisha just has to land the final blow, which will count as her kill. He adds that prayer orbs are super hard to find, but he already has one, so they're good to go. Even the big, tall, dimwit Wilhelm thinks Shin's alright, but he still can't just leave him to handle level 150 undead with Leisha, so he decides to tag along. Shin gives a nod, and Tria wishes Lassia good luck. Later, Shin and Yuzuha are just chilling, walking through the church corridor when they spot Wilhelm up ahead, and Shin walks closer to him. Wilhelm asks if Shin is the chosen one, but Shin plays it cool like he has no idea what he's talking about. Wilhelm explains it, and Shin asks if it includes memories of past lives. Wilhelm says nope, mostly just info about items and monsters. Wilhelm admits he's never heard of anyone remembering a past life, but he won't make Shin spill everything. Then, he warns Shin to be careful who he tells about it, since most people haven't even heard of the chosen one. Surprisingly, Wilhelm seems pretty caring, which makes Shin wonder if people are actually scared of him. But Wilhelm's like, nah, I don't care what others think. Shin sees him as a hero who protects the orphanage, but Wilhelm says the kids cry because some greedy pigs keep messing with them, and he just wants to shut those stupid greedy pigs up. This totally cracks Shin up. Then Shin gets a message from Tira, saying her master responded and she'll be back as soon as she's done working. She tells him to keep them updated once he leaves Bayrelict, and her master apparently has a bunch of questions about him. Immediately, the top left of his window starts blinking, important, and he clicks it to open a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Wilhelm recognizes the letter and pulls out his own. They're both super surprised to see each other has this letter. They hold them close, and sure enough, they resonate and glow. The next morning, Shin, Wilhelm, and Lassia make their way to the Ghost Plains to hunt for undead. Lassia's sweating buckets like a Christmas goat, but Shin hands her the prayer orb and tells her to make sure she keeps holding it. They walk along until they run into some undead. The undead try to attack, but Shin zaps them with a single ablution spell. He then tells Leisha to attack the biohounds. She points her weapon at the downed undead, chants heal, and poof, they vanish. As another wave of enemies shows up, Shin and Wilhelm go ham while Leisha does her thing with healing magic. They keep going until they hit a blue, wall-like barrier, a seal created by the guild. Wilhelm touches the wall with his guild card, and it opens up. As they walk through, Wilhelm tells them that the undead beyond this point are on a whole other level, so they better be ready. On Shin's map, he can see enemies ahead, including wrapped raptors and jumpkins. He tells Wilhelm to handle the ones in front, while he takes the ones to their left, and Yuzuha stays with Lassia to deal with anything that comes their way. Leisha ends up healing a ton of enemies and gains a bunch of levels, even though she's still a little freaked out. Meanwhile, folks from the castle also hear about the undead in the Ghost Plains, so they show up for a hunt too. The Skullfaces are pretty tough, but Lady Rion is slicing them up with that sword that flew into the castle, making it a bit easier. The elite castle groups are having a hard time with a massive Skullface, when a silver-haired elf named Schnee shows up to help take it down. After they defeat the monster, she heals everyone in the elite group with her wide heal magic. They all recognize her and bow, and she bows back. The head of the elite group reports to her about the recent Skullface outbreak, hoping the one she just killed was the last. She tells them she'll keep searching around, and they should use their magic item if they run into any more monsters. That tall, fit jerk kills a huge Skullface, and Lacia starts feeling some weird effect as she tries to use her magic. Shin tells her it's happening because she's met the conditions to learn a new skill. She's spaced out, thinking she's a goner, but then her mind is suddenly flooded with images of how to use the Purify skill. Shin congratulates her on her new achievement, and she's super happy they'll be able to save the orphanage now that she's leveled up, and they plan to take a quick break before heading back to Bayrelict when they see a magic matter in the sky, animating the undead. The magic matter drains power from monsters until they can't keep their form and just vanish. It sucks up all the power and forms a small, no wait, a super huge, unbelievably massive monster with a level of 804, a deadly monster looking to munch on humans. They all think they'll be fine because they have the seal, but the huge monster leaps super high and shatters the seal with one hit. And it's not just the huge monster. Other Skullface enemies show up too. Wilhelm tells Shin to let them break through and flee, but Shin reminds him that the seal's gone and he can't let these monsters roam free, so he's stopping them, no matter what. He chants limit off and tells Wilhelm to take care of Yuzuha and Leisha. Wilhelm is totally shocked by Shin's power and hopes to get some answers once they're back home. Shin uses uses a lighting banker magic to blast through the monsters, clearing a path for Wilhelm and Leisha to escape. After they leave, Shin pulls out his sword to fight, and Yuzuha kicks things off by using her foxfire to strike the enemies. The huge monster roars, and even more skull faces arrive. Shin feels like this is gonna go on forever because more keep showing up every time it roars. Then, he chants Flying Sparrow Thunderstrike to attack, which only takes out a fraction of them, but it definitely digs a deep trench in the ground. Shin wishes Schnee were here so he'd have more options for fighting them. Suddenly, he sees a blue marker on his map getting closer, and he makes a quick detour to land near it. Turns out the blue marker is Schnee, who was lost but now found. After a minute of silence, the enemies head their way, and the awesome Yuzuha creates a big wall to block them. Schnee hugs her weirdo master, Shin, hoping he's got some good stuff. Shin tries to say a few things, then just blurts out, "I'm back," and she welcomes him with tears streaming down her face. Shortly after, Yuzuha gets tired, and the barrier fades, with the huge monster heading straight for them. Now they have no choice but to fight the enemies and save their discussion for later. Then, they both chant Sanctuary to create a light magic circle that fills the sky, killing and making the enemies vanish. Shin then uses his mighty sword to slice the huge monster in half. Right before its soul flies out, it tries to say, "Give that power to me," but its bragging means nothing to him. Shin then recovers its gemstone. After they totally wreck that ginormous monster, Shin's like, "Hey, can we chat for a sec?" He spills everything that went down after he got yeeted to meet Gatekeeper Origin, all the way until he woke up in a field 500 years later. Shnee's super relieved to hear his whole crazy story. Then, she tells him that the dungeon just straight up vanished. Poof. She and the other support characters were super confused why they were still around when they should have disappeared with him, so they decided to hunt him down. But then, huge earthquakes totally messed up the continent, so they had to split up and do their own thing. Eventually, she headed back to the Moon Sanctum, which brings us to right now. Shin's a little freaked out about her calling him Master when there are other people around, cause he's trying to keep his identity on the down low. So he's like, "Hey, just call me by my name." She thinks it's kinda dumb, but she goes with it anyway. He asks what his plans are, and Shin says he's thinking of checking out this spot he read about while doing research at the kingdom's library. Shnee's only done a quick look-see there, but she has no clue what it's like inside. Then, she asks if he'll come back for her if he finds a way to bounce from this place, and he's like, "Yep." He then asks how much she remembers from the game, and she's like, "Everything." She means everything from the day they landed in this world together. She says she became way more aware during what Shin and the other support characters called the death game. Before that, it was like she was just watching a video. Basically, the other support characters totally knew they'd disappear after logging out. After a super deep chat about their past from back then until the next morning, they make plans to have a party once they're back at the Moon Sanctum. Then she asks where he found Yuzuha. He introduces Yuzuha to her and tells her to keep it a secret. Schnee could tell Yuzuha wasn't just any spirit the second she saw its three tails. Suddenly, Yuzuha wakes up and actually talks to him. He's totally blown away, but Yuzuha's head cleared up once that giant creature vanished. He then tells Yuzuha to keep quiet when other people are around. He asks it to combine its three tails into one, and it does. Schnee picks Yuzuha up to give it some pets. Anyway, they bolt out of the forest as fast as they can to catch up with Shin's buddy. Meanwhile, that total slacker of a fit guy, Wilhelm, is hauling butt with Leisha on his back when they notice something zooming toward them at a ridiculous speed. They start to think it might be the monster's enemies coming for them. Surprise! Shin and Schnee show up, and Wilhelm gets a little annoyed that he got all confused, while Leisha just straight up faints. The castle folks find the messed up ground, but they have no idea what happened. The princess, Lady Ryo, is totally clueless, wondering who could have made that magical light circle in the sky that healed everyone and zapped all the monsters. Gadras, one of the knights, spots Shin's awesome sword way out in the broken ground and quickly tells Lady Rione. Another big question they need to figure out is what kind of skill could even do something like that. Then, they see a bird symbol, a falcon, on the sword. Gadras says he knows a blacksmith who carves and forges swords like this and puts falcons on all their work. Gadras shows them a little bit of what the sword can do. Then, he says that Blacksmith is the Black Blacksmith, the absolute best smithy around. Lady Rion can't believe high humans still exist. She thought they'd all left the world. Gadras tells her the blacksmith owns the Moon Sanctum, and she decides they're going to visit them when they get back to town. She even says she'd challenge the blacksmith to a duel if she found him. Regardless, Gadras warns the kinda dumb Lady Rion not to just attack him and claims she's testing his skills, though her expression shows she has some common sense. Wilhelm asks Shin to explain who he is, especially after all the crazy stuff he's been doing and the fact that he got Schnee, who bows to no one, to follow him. Shin's about to give Schnee all the credit for taking down the huge creature when Wilhelm totally scares him with his venom spear. Shin's like, "How did you know?" Then Wilhelm tells Shin he totally saw him pop off that flashy spell and catch up to them like it was nothing. After a bit of spear waving, he finally spills his real identity and his connection to Schnee. The useless scumbag is totally shocked to hear all this, and Shin then asks if there are any old records of them, high humans, and Wilhelm tells him that all the stories are about how ridiculously strong and skilled Shin is. Schnee adds that others left behind various cool stories too. Anyway, Shin's so confident he calls himself a blacksmith. He tells Wilhelm he can help him fix up his venom spear at a discount, but Wilhelm can't trust him because he looks like a sketchy merchant. However, the lazy Lacia wakes up and is super happy to see Shin. Then, they introduce Schnee Razor to her, and Lacia thinks it's incredibly cool to meet her. On their way out of the Ghost Plains, she almost falls, and Shin says it must be from running around like a horse. Wilhelm then tells Shin that his job is done the second Lacia learned the skill, so if anything pops up at the church, it's their problem to deal with. But Shin hands the good-for-nothing, a card to hit him up if anything goes sideways, and Wilhelm replies that he'd be in a desperate situation if he had to use that card. Basically, he's saying Shin's gonna get dragged into some serious stuff. Shin tells him to drag him into it. Besides, he can't ditch the first friend he made in Bayrelict and the kids he's trying to protect. You guys should keep your popcorn ready until he calls for help. Then, everyone goes their separate ways. Shin and Schnee finally roll up to the Moon Sanctum late at night, and they can smell something amazing, so they definitely want to eat first. Tira pops out of the inner room to hug her master, and she's about to remind Schnee what she wrote in the letter when Schnee calms her down. Then, the poor, chatty Tira figures out the guy standing there is Shin, and she wonders how they ended up together. It's gonna take forever to explain the whole long story, so they decide to have dinner first. Tira screams when her master tells her Shin will be eating with them. Well, Schnee feels a bit silly that she didn't tell Tira that Shin is the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Tira is absolutely flabbergasted to hear that the owner is a legendary high human. Shin identified himself when they first met, but I guess she didn't take him seriously. She's scared of getting kicked out, so she quickly apologizes to him. Then, he introduces his talking elemental buddy, Yuzuha. Everything just seems brand new to Tira. Schnee whips up an awesome dinner for them, and she claims she picked the absolute best ingredients because it's a special occasion, but she can't explain more because of time. Shin claims that Schnee used the fancy ingredients he got to cook, but Tira yells that no one would ever think of getting those high-end ingredients, let alone cooking with them. They thank each other for the meal, and they start devouring every last bit of the food, with both Shin and Tira begging for more. After dinner, Shin seems worried about his other support characters, so he asks Schnee about them, and she tells him that they all understood it was best not to stress about him. Shin appreciates that. At least it's better than looking for someone who might not even be around. Tira, who's totally wasted, interrupts them and starts blabbering. Schnee heads to her room to crash, while Shin and Yuzuha find their way to their room too. In the middle of the night, he finds Schnee sleeping next to him on his bed, and he just can't go back to sleep. He watches as tears roll down her face. He quietly apologizes to her and gently cleans her face, even though he has no idea why she's crying. The next day, Shin wakes up, and Schnee's totally not there, but then he sees this silvery hair, and he's like, whoa, what's that? He takes a closer look and realizes Yuzuha is already in her human form. Shin's kind of flustered, so he finds her an elemental dress to wear in the game. Schnee and Tira are totally shocked to see Yuzuha all human-like. Schnee, being the awesome house manager she is, whips up another amazing breakfast spread, and everyone's super thankful after grubbing down. Then, Shin asks Yuzuha why she's chilling at the shrine, and she says it's just the comfiest spot. He tries asking if she knows anything about the symbols in the magic circle, but nope, she's clueless. He pushes a bit more, asking if she knows anything about all those people disappearing 500 years ago, and again, she's got nothing. Yuzuha explains she was just napping outside when a huge natural disaster hit, and she tried to stop it. All that effort kinda messed her up, so she was resting at the shrine. Right when she thought she was a goner, Shin totally showed up. Shin tells her he was able to save her because of Mill, so Mill totally deserves some appreciation, maybe with a cool gift or something. Schnee chimes in, suggesting kafal, an elven baked treat Tira makes. Shin reminds them the Moon Sanctum isn't mainly a food shop, but Schnee's quick to point out that he's the only one who can unlock the armory, even if they wanted to restock. So, he decides to craft a few swords later to fill up the store's inventory. Then, Schnee tells Shin there's someone super important she wants him to meet. As soon as possible, Gyrart, one of his support characters. Shin's a bit confused, wondering how Gyrart's still alive since high beasts usually only live for like 150 years max, but Schnee explains that a few days won't make a huge difference, and he probably doesn't have much longer. He's apparently been waiting for Shin. She reminds Shin that Gyrart united all the different beast tribes and formed the Farned Beast Alliance, and Shin actually remembers they call him the first Beast King. She tells him the current king is the 8th, who's got all the military might and leadership skills, and has been following Gyrart, waiting for Shin in peace. Then, Shin tells both Yuzuha and Schnee to get ready to roll with him. Schnee turns to Tira, who she playfully calls good for nothing, and says she's coming too this time. Maybe they don't need to be so stressed about the Moon Sanctum now that Shin's back. Tira's a little worried about the shop, but she's gotta go if they want her to. They all need to start prepping, but Schnee says she'll report on the Skullfaces to the kingdom, and Shin will hit up the guild after making some swords to look for a job in the direction of the Farned to rank up. He also says he'll message her about where to meet up. At that, Schnee suggests they form a party so they can use voice chat, aka telepathy. Schnee tells Tira to seize the opportunity and register as an adventurer. So, Tira heads to her room to change. Schnee heads out, while Shin and Yuzuha make their way to the forge. At the forge, Shin warns Yuzuha that she can only look at the weapons, not touch them, because some of them are totally cursed. Then, he starts forging swords, and he's just nailing it, making perfect ones one after another. Finally, Tira gets dressed. Yuzuha transforms back into her cute little fox form, and they all head to the guild. Poor Tira can't believe her eyes when she sees crowds everywhere on their way to the guild. She's acting like a little kid at an amusement park. She even grabs Shin's hand like she knows exactly where they're going, until Shin reminds her he's the one taking her to the guild. Inside the guild, Shin gets bumped up to rank E. He's like, how did that even happen? I haven't even done one job. Celica tells him he totally defeated a high-ranking skullface and then a surprise horde of them, and that the guild checked his reports and decided to promote him. Then, she asks if Tira's his girlfriend because she heard them holding hands like a couple, but Shin plays it cool, saying they're just traveling together on mutual business. Since he's stopping, he thought she should register as an adventurer and get a guild card. Celica tries to dig for more info, but Shin quickly shuts it down. Then, he asks her if she has any intel on sites, those places destroyed during the Dusk of Prosperity. Celica tells him they can't spill that info to anyone below rank B. Shin's cool with that, saying he'll check back when he's leveled up. Then he asks if there are any jobs he could snag on his way to Farned. She checks her records and finds out someone needs a wagon to Bayryun's staging post. She also mentions they're leaving this afternoon when the bell rings twice, and 2 adventurers have already signed on, so he should meet up with them. It's gonna take a bit for Tira's guild card to be ready, and Shin and the other 2 adventurers aren't meeting until the afternoon. So, they decide to use their limited time to wander around town on their way to the church. After some exploring, they find their way to the church where they meet Lacia, who's cleaning. Both ladies introduce themselves. When Lacia hears Shnee's name, she starts firing off a million questions, but who's gonna answer all of those? Milla is absolutely ecstatic to see Shin and Yuzuha again. She always feels like they shouldn't leave her. Lacia happily tells Shin that she's gonna be the next head of the church. Tria also says the kids are super happy too, but they just don't know how to thank him enough. Shin's flattered and then asks about Wilhelm, and Lacia says he's out investigating other priests. Nobody really knows why that greedy pig wants to take over the church. Then, Shin gives them a bunch of stuff enchanted with all kinds of magic, including Mille. Instantly, other kids totally rush into the room and dogpile Shin, begging him to stay and play with them. In the very next second, they're all over Tira, and she starts screaming. As they step out of the church, Lacia apologizes to Tira for any trouble the kids might have caused. Tira wasn't really sure how it felt since she'd never played with children before, but she said the kids were cute and sweet. Then, they head to the guild to grab Tira's guild card, and then pick up the Moon Sanctum. Shin's not expecting her to forget they're picking up a whole house, but she thinks it's ridiculous and straight up crazy to carry a house around in the first place. For Shin though, carrying the house around is totally normal since he owns it. In a safe spot along the road, Shin pulls out this super refined crystal, and says it's enchanted with the teleport spell, so he tells her they can use it to get to the Moon Sanctum. Tira finds everything about him extraordinary, and he casually adds that he made the crystal himself anyway. Then, they use it to teleport themselves to the Moon Sanctum, and then he chants storage to turn the house into this ring-like thing in transport mode. Looks like they're all done with their errands, so they head off to the job. They instantly recognize the Nax wagon when they get to the spot. Both Shin and Tira introduce themselves to the first adventurer. That guy introduces himself as Gaian, and the other red-haired young adventurer introduces himself as Tsubaki. Then, a man arrives and introduces himself as Nock the Merchant, and they finally take off. Meanwhile, the knights are reporting to His Majesty about the Moon Sanctum totally vanishing. Everyone knows it's this unmovable structure that survived the Dusk of Prosperity, and no one could ever break into it. The Moon Sanctum is this mystical shop made from lost technology. Because of this, His Majesty sees it as way more than just a problem for the Bayrelicht Kingdom if the Moon Sanctum has actually disappeared. They also report that they heard Schnee is heading to the castle. Lady Rione's sister is even worried about Lady Rione, who still hasn't returned, and they don't even have enough information to do anything. Then, she suggests they should just wait for Miss Blank that in debt, Schnee, to arrive, and His Majesty totally agrees. So, they're cruising through the forest, heading to Bayryun, and Shin's dropping some serious truth bombs on Tira. He's like, yo, escorting gigs? You gotta be tough and totally confident, cause bandits are way more of a problem than monsters out here. Preach. Then, it's introduction time, cause, you know, bonding. We got Gayen, a samurai, top tier rank A. Seems pretty useless with magic though. Next up, Tsubaki, a boxer, rank E. But get this, he can totally cast support spells to boost speed. How cool is that? Then there's Tira, an alchemist, fresh-faced and rank G, but she's got skills with a bow and sword and she can heal. Shin, he's a samurai too, rank E, like Gayen, but he can throw down with a little fire and lightning magic. And of course, the adorable Yuzuha, Shin's little monster buddy. Both Gayen and Tsubaki are super impressed that Shin's a samurai who can cast spells, and even crazier, has a monster who actually likes him. Tsubaki figures Shin's from Hinamoto, where most samurais are from. Hinamoto, by the way, is this epic island nation born from a natural disaster, and it's home to tons of samurai and shinobi guild HQs. Shin's curious about the common guilds there, and Gayen rattles off Kasho Figetsu, Majin Kepperoku, and Kuromiko Jinja. Sounds like some serious game guilds. Am I right? But wait, record scratch. Suddenly, some armed bandits jump out and stop their wagon, threatening to off them if they don't hand over all their cash and cargo. Nak's practically shaking out of his boots, so Shin's all, "Get in the wagon, Nak. Yuzuha's got your back." The bandits are being total jerks, saying they won't get excited unless they hear screaming, and they totally underestimate little Tsubaki too. Big mistake. Gaien, trying to be all cool, flashes his sword, telling the bandits to bounce or face his blade. But nope, these bandits aren't phased at all. They even know their ranks, which totally throws Shin and the others for a loop. I'd be like, whoa, how do they know? Tira, sneaky one she is, spots more bandits hiding behind trees and starts peppering them with arrows from the back of the wagon. That just makes the bandits even angrier, and bam, it's a full-on brawl. Tsubaki goes first, hitting the mouthy bandits with a flashing vigor, and takes one down with a single hit. Gaien slices a bandit and his sword in half. Shin's also slashing through bandits like a boss. The bandit leader's totally confused, wondering how these guys are so strong when some of them are just rank E or lower. Even when he's the last one standing, he tries to bluff with his magical sword, but Shin just moves in, chops off his sword, then proceeds to beat the snot out of him and tie him up. Tira, seeing Shin's intense rage and bloodlust, quickly gives him a big hug until he calms down. Nobody gets what this girl is doing, but then she remembers her master used to calm her down with the same hug. Gaien drops the bombshell that these bandits were after church goods, but had no clue what they were even trying to steal. They just wanted to kill everyone and take everything. Shin remembers Tria, telling him that they needed official church authorization for the next head, so he's thinking someone might be trying to mess with that. Still, he feels good about escorting the wagon. They finally roll into Beirut, and Nak's super thankful, hooking them up with job completion certificates they can take to the guild, so off they go to the guild to report in. After that, Gaien and Tsubaki head off to Kilmont, while Shin and Tira are off to Farned. Farned's a pretty long haul, so Shin suggests they snag their own wagon. At the wagon store, they're all pretty basic, so Shin's like, we gotta trick this thing out. He wants to reduce the shaking and make the wheels smoother for a comfier ride. Sounds like he's showing off a little, but in a good way. They find this massive wagon they can sleep in and has room for all their stuff, perfect for when Schnee shows up. The seller advises them to get some strong-legged horses to pull their new ride. Then Shin's like, I heard some people use monsters to pull wagons? The seller confirms it, saying monsters are way stronger, but you gotta tame one first. Then they head out. Next scene, Shin's actually thinking about having Yuzuha transform if things get desperate, when Schnee suddenly hits him up with a telepathic call. Alert, looks like she finished her business in the kingdom. Shin tells her they just bought a wagon but need horses for Farned. Schnee's all, leave it to me, I'll catch a monster for you. Then she spills the tea about the kingdom being worried, cause the moon sanctum just vanished. She says she'll be in Beirut within a day, but he'll have to wait. Shin says he'll tell her when they find an inn. Then he tells Tira they should just chill and check out the sights while they hunt for a place to stay. Some random woman points them to a sweet inn, where they drop almost half their reward. Shin's a little freaked, but Tira's like, nah, she probably just thought adventurers could afford it. When they get to their separate rooms, Yuzuha immediately lands on the bed and transforms into her human form. Shin decides to do some sword maintenance. Tira then pops into his room, asking if he told her master they're in the city. He says she'll meet them there, but he doesn't know when. A little later, they're having dinner in their room, and Shin gets up for a quick bath. Bad news for him. Yuzuha and Tira beat him to it, so he just keeps working on his weapons, but they're being silly and distracting him, so he backs away from the bathroom. The next morning, Shin's working on the wagon until Schnee arrives, and Tira decides to watch him mod it. She's blown away when Shin fixes the wheel to stop shaking in less than a minute. Shin decides to install the bearings super discreetly to avoid drawing attention. Right after that, Schnee calls Shin, telling him she's already in the woods past the north gate. He tells her they'll be right there. Shin has no choice but to finish up at the wagon store, and they head off to meet Schnee. They get to the woods and see this massive monster Schnee's caught, a Grufazio Jade, level 751. Shin, curious, asks where she found it, and she's like, oh, just the nearby mountain. Shin praises her, but she totally loses it when he compliments her. The monster actually takes a liking to Tira and rubs its nose on her cheek. Then he asks Schnee why she picked this specific monster, and she says she knows it has to be a beast-class monster to pull his wagon. Shin's worried it's way too big for their tiny wagon. Schnee, who totally predicted her weirdo boss would be dumb, makes the monster shrink. It can control its size, so it shrinks to wagon-appropriate dimensions. Tira finds it so intimidating she almost faints. Honestly, I'm with Tira. It's wild how Shin and Schnee act like this is totally normal. Shin never expected her to bring something so high level, but he's stoked to have a cool beast pulling his wagon. The monster makes a sound, and Yuzuha translates, saying it means they can count on it. Awesome! Both monsters can chat. Schnee tells them its name is Shimmer, and it can use illusion and thunder skills. Then she tells Shimmer to be good to her master. Shin hitches Shimmer to their wagon, and he steers it towards Farned to see an old friend, Gyrart. Even with Shin's efforts, they still turn heads. But who cares? The wagon doesn't shake, and it's even better than a royal carriage. Basically, everyone loves it. But then, Yuzuha drops a bombshell. Shimmer and its mom used to rule the mountain together, but an adventurer defeated its mom, and only Shimmer survived. An elf rescued it, and Shimmer worked hard to get stronger and go back to the mountain. Hearing this, Schnee figures out why Shimmer wasn't cautious around her. Shimmer makes a sound to tell them it followed her, cause she smelled familiar, but then it was Tira's smell, meaning Tira is the elf who rescued it, and Tira remembers rescuing a puppy when she was a kid, too. Because of this, Schnee ends her contract with Shimmer and tells Tira to form a new one. Tira makes a contract with Shimmer and feels super weak, so Shin picks her up to rest a bit. So at night, these guys find a spot to crash and spark up a fire to stay warm. Schnee tells Shin she totally let Tira keep Shimmer so he could protect her. Like, they can't always be there, right? So she'll feel way better knowing Shimmer's got her back when she's off doing her own thing. Plus, Tira can just summon Shimmer whenever, and they know he's dependable. Then, Schnee tells Shin she'll totally be there for him if he ever gets into a pickle. Shin's super relieved and then confesses that she's literally the person he runs to when he's completely messed up. The next morning, they link up with two big shot folks in southeastern Farnid, right by the Ralua forest. Schnee says he messaged Gairart, so these two must be here to meet them. The two people bow down and say they're there on orders from the first king, and Schnee asks them to take them to Gairart. Shin uses his power to keep the wagon steady, and Shimmer shrinks down to the size of a normal dog. As they're heading to the mansion, Schnee tells Shin these two are Gairart's grandkids. Whatcha know, when Gairart sees Shin, he calls him master, and says he never thought he'd see him alive again. Shin actually thought Gairart was dead too. Before they get to the main event, Gairart introduces Wolfgang, the current Beast King, and his daughter, Quore. Then there's his two trusty advisors, Van Ku and Rajim Dalk. Shin just introduces himself as, well, Shin, and a high human. They both tell each other to just chill and talk normally, but Gairart's totally being sarcastic, calling Shin master, since he usually doesn't. Gairart claims it's the only way to keep his crew from freaking out, because you know high humans are basically legends to the Farnid people, something to be both scared of and service it. So, Gairart and Shin start reminiscing about the last time they totally owned some giant monsters and have a good laugh about it. Gairart wants to brag about starting a whole nation, but Schnee already spilled the tea, so it's old news. Schnee figures it's better she said something than waiting for Gairart to totally over-exaggerate. Then, Schnee whips up some tea for them while they keep chatting. Shin explains the same stuff he told Schnee to Gairart, and Gairart also tried looking for Shin, but just couldn't find him. Before Shin can even say anything, Gairart quickly blurts out that he's gonna die soon, like less than a month left. Shin's like, how do you know that? And Gairart says he's felt something's been off for weeks, but Schnee confirming Shin's return made him certain. Then, he drops the bomb. He wants to duel Shin. He wants to fight Shin, the strongest warrior. What the fuck, right? That's what Shin's thinking. Shin wonders if Gairart wants to go out like a true warrior in battle, and Gairart honestly wishes that were true, but Shin accepts the challenge. Then, he asks Gairart if he told his crew, and Gairart says he told them about his life expectancy, but not the duel yet, and he plans to. He also mentions that his two confidants, Van Ku and Rajim Dalk, have been fighting alongside him since Shin vanished. They're both super long-lived beasts, but they're getting old, including him. Then, he says Wolfgang is an awesome ruler, listens to his people, and walks side by side with them. He adds that Wolfgang's already a great replacement for him, but his only regret is never dueling Shin. That night, Gairart tells his people he found the perfect place to die, and he's asked Shin to duel him before his time's up. The duel's happening in a week. Quore is totally not cool with it, and wonders if everyone's just gonna sit there and watch their master say this stuff. But Gairart tells her he's lived a long life, and she'll understand why in a week. She has no choice but to accept his master's wish. Gairart then tells them they'll fight in Ralua Forest. It'll be the ultimate greatest battle of his life, and he wants them to see it. Shin helps Gairart restore his hand shield weapon to perfect condition in his Moon Sanctum blacksmith room. Seeing it, Gairart feels like time just rewound. Then, he asks if Shin would go back to his own world if he found a way home, leaving Schnee behind. Shin thinks for a few minutes and then says he would go home, and that's why he's been fighting. That surprises Gairart, but what can he do? Nothing. Shin wishes everything could just work out for him and Schnee, but honestly, you don't always get what you wish for. Then, he tells Shin he's super pumped for tomorrow, the fight day. The next day, Gairart is totally hyped, ready, and raring to go for the duel. They all head to Ralua Forest in Shin's wagon for the fight. Even his own crew hasn't seen him grinning like a goofball in ages. When they get there, Schnee tells Shin to fight his heart out and not to worry about a thing. Then, she bows, entrusting Gairart to him. Wolfgang and Quore also promise to never forget Gairart's teachings as the first king. Then, the fight kicks off with warm-ups while everyone watches. The warm-up brings back memories of their fighting 500 years ago, even though the warm-up itself is like the sky is falling. Then, Gairart transforms into a massive single fang and remembers Shin telling him he'd fight as hard as he could, but wouldn't use the titles he got from beating the final boss. That wouldn't be fair, but he still wants to fight Shin at full power because he believes this is his only shot. Shin goes for the first strike, and Gairart totally dodges it by popping up behind him, thinking Shin's slow, but Shin blocks the attack with his sword. Then, Gairart channels a ton of power and hurls it at Shin, who tries to stop it, but it's super tough. Gairart appears behind him again to hit him, and Shin dodges again. He starts chaining different skills together, but none of them even graze Shin's sword. Shin then decides to go all out. He strikes with haze, and Gairart counters with legendary excellence. At the exact same time, this epic clash from both sides shatters Shin's Shin's sword into pieces and just barely chips Gairart's fang. In the end, Gairart lands a close blow on Shin, then collapses and reverts to his human form. Shin is seriously impressed with his strategy and that he actually got him. Gairart claims he didn't live for 500 years for nothing, and his long-awaited wish has been fulfilled. Then, he asks Shin for one last thing as a reward for landing that hit. Shin does it, and Gairart dies, his time officially over. But get this, Shin comes back with Gairart's body and tells his crew that their king actually landed a hit on him, a high human, which means Gairart basically reached his level. Gairart's confidants are relieved that he looked satisfied, even though he's gone. Everyone in the nation cries for the first king's death, and his crew throws him the best funeral ever. That night, Shni sees her master sitting alone outside, staring at the sky. She runs to him and hugs him tight. She comforts him and begs him to let her know if there's anything she can do. With tears streaming down his face, he says he knew this was what Gairart wanted, but it still hurts to lose a friend. However, Shni tells him he did his duty, and it's totally okay to be sad. Next up, they're off to meet Shweed, the High Dragnir, one of Shin's old support characters. Shni and Tira use these cosplay items, stuff Shin made to hide their species traits, to disguise themselves as beasts so they can blend in. Honestly, they're slaying it. And if I were there, I might actually propose to either of them that they find their way to where reps from different nations stay to look for Shweed the High Dragnir, and Wolfgang and Quore are there to direct them inside. On their way, Shin asks Shni if Shweed is a ruler like Gairart, and she says no. He was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, Kilmont, but he cut ties with the royal family. She adds that Shweed's been living the good life ever since Kilmont stabilized. Anyway, they make it to a room's entrance, and a guard shows them to their seats and then goes to fetch Lord Shweed. Wolfgang also bails, saying he has a meeting, but tells them to hit up Quore if they need anything. After a minute, Lord Shweed finally shows up and totally bows down to his master, Shin. He's like stoked to see him and ready to jump back into action. Dude's looking a little rough around the edges though, but Shin's all, chill man, I'll fill you in on everything I told Shni, and Shni's nodding along like, yep, it's all true. Shweed's a bit confused why Shni's calling Shin by his actual name, but he just rolls with it. First thing he notices, Shni's outfit. He's like, whoa, why are you dressed like that? And she just coolly replies, to suit Shin's taste. Classic. So, they're chilling, and Shin spills all the beans. Shweed's a bit sad about his own death, but honestly, he's just relieved he went out like a true warrior. Then Shweed's like, so what's next for you, Shin? And Shin's all, I've totally scoured all the libraries around here, so I guess the place is next on my research list. But Shweed says he's gotta head back to Kilmont for a bit, but he's down to team up afterward. It's been ages since they went on an adventure together, right? Shweed suggests they just use telepathy to stay in touch. Before he bounces, he hands Shin his awesome weapon, Nagazuki. Shin's holding it, and it feels supernatural in his hands, even though it's been forever. Shin's like, yeah, I kept it all maintained for you. And even Shweed can tell it's way more powerful than he remembers. Turns out Shin's mana control has leveled up big time since he fixed Gairart's gear, so Nagazuki is now, like, 5 times stronger. Everyone, including Shweed, is totally blown away. Over at the guild, Shin's ready to grind and get his adventurer rank up to, like, C, so he picks goblin slaying for his next quest. Quore asks if she can tag along, and Shin's like, totally. She adds that she'll finish up her current work once they get back. She's been checking out the Ralua forest, where that epic duel went down, just to make sure it's growing back properly. Apparently, the whole place looked like a tornado threw a wild party and just dipped without cleaning up. Shin asks if he can join her on that, since he was part of the whole duel thing, and she's like, yep. So first they hit up the forest to hunt some goblins, and then it's off to Ralua forest to check things out. And get this, the forest is totally back to normal. Quore says they need to examine the new trees and look for anything weird. She tells them to grab any unusual herbs they spot. At the end of the day, they report back to the guild to get their findings checked. The guild attendant hands Shin a letter from Barlux, the guild master of the Bayrelict branch. The letter says Shin needs to head to Bayrelict as soon as possible, to the palace. Shin's wondering why they want him there, and then it hits him. It's probably about that unique Skullface Jack's sword that totally broke into the castle. So, now he's got no choice but to go there and deal with it before he can even think about his rank. Shni and Tira are coming with him, and Quore too, but she can't leave her country. Before he leaves for Bayrelict, Shin asks to see Wolfgang so he can give him Gairart's Death Moon, those handfang weapons. He tells Wolfgang that the weapons have new owners now, so Wolfgang can transfer them to whoever he wants. Wolfgang's confused, cause he heard they got wrecked in the duel. Shin just casually says he created them, so fixing them was like, no big deal, but he admits Gairart asked him to give them to Wolfgang after the duel. Wolfgang tests them out, and they fit his hands perfectly, so he accepts the responsibility. Instead of taking forever with his wagon, Shin whips out a crystal item and teleports them to another area. Then, he checks his map and notices someone's watching them, but he quickly uses his stealth skill. Maybe those guys think the Moon Sanctum is gonna pop up right there, but they must have forgotten it can totally move. Talking about the Moon Sanctum makes Shni a bit nervous that Shin might disappear again, but she quickly plays it cool when Shin glances her way. Then, they get going. leaving Shin behind, and he quickly reminds them that he's the one Barlux summoned. They finally make it to the Bayrelift Guild, where Shin reports to the two kinda quirky twin sisters about the letter he got from the guildmaster. Silica heads off to go find the guildmaster. Then, Shin asks Celica if she knows what all this is about. She says she doesn't know much, but she totally expected him to get summoned soon cause he's clearly not just some regular adventurer. Celica then switches gears and teases him about always traveling with women, and Shin's all, hey, I have guy friends too. He brings up Wilhelm, who he worked with on an unofficial job, and suddenly the whole guild goes silent, like a graveyard, when they hear Wilhelm's name. Celica tells him that Wilhelm rarely teams up, and there are tons of rumors about him, so people find him super hard to approach, but Shin knows Wilhelm is seriously awesome. A few minutes later, Silica comes back and directs Shin to the guildmaster. He meets Barlux and Arid Royal, the mage who appraises gems for the guild. In the room, Barlux tells Shin that Arid checked out the skullface gem he brought in that time. Shin then asks why he got summoned. Instead of answering right away, Arid asks Shin if he knows about a sword that flew into the castle, and Shin pretends like he heard the same story. Arid says the huge sword crashed into the second princess of Bayrelicht's bedroom, but luckily, no one got hurt. He adds that the sword's elemental enchantment and materials are super impressive, maybe even as good as the king's royal sword. The gem from the skullface Shin defeated had crazy powerful mana. It was, like a high-level gem. So, Shin asks how they figured out he was involved. Arid, being an appraiser, says he was told to check out the sword, and the mana traces on it totally matched the mana from the gem. From there, they followed the clues and found out Shin was the one who brought the gem, so that's why he got summoned. Given the situation, the guild couldn't keep his secret. Not even Barlux could do much. Barlux tells him it's not all bad though, because he had a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Getting down to business, Barlux tells him it's the second princess, Lady Ryon, who summoned him. Shin wonders if she's gonna blame him for almost hurting royalty. Barlux calms him down, saying he won't get punished, especially since Lady Ryon has fought Skullfaces before, and she's convinced everyone that Shin had no choice but to go all out. Shin fills Schnee and Tira in on his chat with Barlux and Arid Royal, and Schnee tells him she thinks they're gonna aggressively try to recruit him or marry him off to some important noble. This totally makes Shin not want to go back there, but Schnee says it's fine to just say no to joining them. Plus, they'd totally lose out if he and his crew left, so that should be enough reason to refuse their service. Schnee even suggests he could tell them she's his fiancée, or that he's engaged to Tira if they start talking about marriage. Yuzuha then transforms into her human form and shouts that she'll be Shin's fiancée, and then, yeah, some silly stuff goes down. The next day, Shin rocks a red uniform and heads to the palace. When he gets there, the guard tells Gadras. Gadras then shows up to escort him inside. Shin checks Gadras' stats. Level 188. He can totally tell this guy is one of the kingdom's most powerful. Anyway, he makes it to the princess's room. She thanks him for coming and introduces herself as Ryon Citrile Bayrelicht, the second princess of the kingdom. Shin bows and introduces himself as an adventurer, but she's pretty chill about etiquette and tells him to just call her Ryon. Without wasting any time, Shin asks why he was summoned to the palace, and she says it's about the skullface. She shows him the sword from a safe box and asks if he recognizes it. He's like, yep, that's the sword the skullface was wielding. The next thing she says is that most adventurers like Shin, who suddenly stand out, are chosen ones. She explains they summon powerful people to the palace, though some have used it to plot assassinations. From her vibe, Lady Ryon can tell Shin seems safe, but Shin's like, I haven't said anything to prove that. Ryon says she has an intuition skill, and her hunches have never been wrong, but the most important thing was that Shin had a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum, and the palace totally knew Schnee wouldn't give one to someone who'd plan an assassination. The moment she mentions getting down to business, Shin starts to worry she'll bring up marriage stuff, but instead, she just says she wants to fight him. Gadras is all like, whoa, Ryon, chill out with the directness, lady. We gotta talk about Shin joining up first. But Ryon is totally not having it. She just wants to see what this dude can actually do. Gadras is still trying to be all proper, but Ryon's just like, your ideas? Meh. She grabs the box with Skullface's sword and tells Shin to follow her. They roll up to a room with a teleportation point, and Shin's like, why do we need to teleport? And she's all, because we're going somewhere we can fight without holding back. So, the three of them warp to this crazy training ground built for epic battles between chosen ones using the teleportation point. Shin asks her what's up with this place, and she just shrugs, saying she has no idea what else it's for. She drops a bombshell. These teleportation points are ancient, pre-dusk of prosperity tech, and people still don't get how they fully work. Shin's kinda scratching his head, thinking it's weird they have these warp points when teleportation is supposedly lost magic. Anyway, they both pick out their weapons, get into position, and are totally ready to throw down. Right before the fight kicks off, she tells him this battle is to test him, so she expects him to really give it his all. Then, Gadras starts the match. They both go for attacks, but it ends with their blades clashing. She drops her sword and goes for a kick, but Shin sees it coming and dodges like a ninja. Shin can totally read her stats, so he quickly adjusts his own to match hers. Then, it's his turn to attack, and again, blades lock. It turns into a full-on strength contest. Then she's like, hey, we can use skills if we want. They both bust out the flashing vigor skill, level, and Gadras is barely able to tell the difference in how buffed up they both got. She tries another quick attack, but Shin dodges again, and her sword just wrecks the ground. Shin knows if he hadn't moved, he'd be toast. It's looking like they're both super skilled and have crazy fast reactions. Gadras is super impressed with Shin, saying his skill is totally on par with the princess's. He even points out that her sword is kind of reaching its limit, so Shin suggests they just call it quits, since they're both equally good at not losing. After all that, she tells Shin she really wants him to join up and serve the kingdom. She promises him a good position, not like a general or anything, but Shin's like, "Nah, I'm good. I prefer the free life of an adventurer." He basically tells her he's not the hero she's looking for. She tells him to hit her up if he ever changes his mind. Shin then asks why she even has Skullface's sword, especially since she didn't even use it against him. She explains that in their kingdom, it's tradition to give a woman a sword when proposing marriage, and she'd use it to slice up any dude who cheated on her. Shin finds that a little unsettling. Then she says she wants to consider the Skullface's sword a gift from him. Shin totally thinks this means she's proposing, so he quickly blurts out that the sword flying to her was a complete accident. She agrees not to push it. Gadras then warns him that some people are plotting to use this whole incident to arrest him as a criminal and make him repay the kingdom through forced service. Lady Ryo suggests they just treat it as a tribute. Shin actually likes that way better than a marriage proposal. That way, Lady Ryo officially gets a super powerful weapon. She adds that Shin can get the kingdom off his back, even though Gadras thinks it's a bit weird. Lady Ryo says she'll pay Shin for the blade from her own cash. With both of them getting a good deal, she basically begs him to let her keep the sword. Shin, who just wants to keep adventuring, says she can totally keep it and he doesn't even need any money. Instead, he asks for access to the restricted zones of the magical library. Lady Ryo is totally baffled why this random guy isn't impressed by a sword worth enough to live like a king for the rest of his life. Then she confesses that she's actually used the sword a few times, and it's starting to feel really good in her hand. They teleport back to the castle, and oh boy, they find two guards laid out like crispy critters on the floor. Behind them is this kingdom priest, Cardinal Greril, and everyone's like, what's he doing here? Shin glances at the guy's stats and figures out he's under a charm and confusion spell. Gadras immediately tries to stop Cardinal Greril, but then Shin and Lady Ryo just poof, get teleported away. Gadras manages to grab Cardinal Greril and reports him to the king, who immediately orders the priest thrown into the dungeon. Sadly, Shin and Ryo get warped to this super rundown, unfinished place. Shin asks where the heck they are. Lady Ryo recognizes it as the land, Kalkia. The whole place looks like something out of a horror movie. They seem to be the only ones there. Total ghost town. Lady Ryo wonders what could possibly make a powerful priest, like Cardinal Greril, lose his mind. Shin says they need to bounce first, and asks if she can use telepathy. She says no, since she's not in a party with anyone. So Shin decides to hit up his crew and tell his companions, Shni and Tira, where to meet them. He asks Ryo about any nearby cities, and she describes the walled city of Valmer, the only way to get in or out of Bayrelict. Lucky for him, Shni calls at just the right time, and she sounds super sad and shaky, asking if Shin's okay. Shin calms her down, saying he's totally fine. She's worried he'll just disappear again, since he vanished so suddenly. Then he explains their situation to Shni, and they both figure someone's controlling Cardinal Greril. Shni says mind-affecting skills are totally taboo, and even royals get executed if they're caught using them. Shin says if that's true, someone's definitely lurking in the shadows. Shin says he could teleport out, but he doubts the princess and her people would let him go if he used supposedly lost magic. Then he asks if Shni can handle things on her end, and she's like, yep. He tells her to meet up at Valmer. Shni then tells Tira that Shin's alright, and that they need to head to the palace for some urgent business. On their way to the palace, Shni spills the beans to Tira that Shin's gotten into some trouble with one of those demons. You know, monsters born from miasma. She describes them as useless scumbags who just want to mess people up. The big difference between them and other monsters is that they get super powered up inside miasma. Plus, they can totally disguise themselves as other monsters. She adds that miasma-afflicted monsters just attack anything and everything. The more human-like a demon is, the stronger and smarter it is, and they're ranked accordingly. So, she figures it's probably a relatively smart demon, count class, at least level 300, maybe even 400, because this one used skills to control a person. Tira gets totally freaked out, realizing she's nowhere near that level. Shni tells her they're just going to observe today, so no need to worry. When they get to a safe spot near the castle, Shni casts hiding, a concealment spell, so nobody notices them. Then she grabs Tira and tells her to hold on tight because they're about to take a quick flight. They hop over the super high fence and then sneak right into the castle. Tira is terrified that they're walking in so brazenly, even though they're using hiding magic. They totally book it to the dungeon where this demon dude is locked up. They spot two guards chilling at the entrance, and Shni, being the boss she is, just puts them to sleep with some sleep magic. Easy peasy. She snags the key from them, opens the dungeon, and bam, they're standing right in front of Cardinal Greril. He's like totally shocked to see her and asks what in the heck she's doing there. She spills the tea about what she heard, but here's the kicker. Cardinal Greril, who's totally messed up by this taboo mind, affecting skill, can't even remember anything being cast on him. He tries his hardest, but all he gets are these tiny broken memories. Schnee figures it's because he's got two mind-affecting things going on at once. So, she calms him down, tells him the two people who got teleported are safe. Then, she just poof dispels the status effect on him, literally forcing the demon out. Turns out it's this multi-eyed demon with hands that regenerate, named Magnamuk, and he's like level 423. Schnee can tell he's super smart just because he has a name. This ugly demon recognizes her right away as the blue-eyed, silver-haired high elf who's always messing up their plans. She's like, "Whoa, it's been 500 years since I saw one of you guys. Not since the cataclysm." The demon tries to attack with his regenerating hands, like, a bunch of times, but Schnee just slashes him every single time with her sword. Then, the demon asks why she's even bothering to protect Cardinal Greril. She's like, "Duh, it'd be a total shame to let him die over some fake charges." Plus, she tells the demon it'd be a disgrace to the Moon Sanctum if she let him run wild. The dumb demon knows the Moon Sanctum is where the high humans used to be, and they've totally kicked his kind's butt before. But then, this disgusting demon tries to get Schnee to join them, and she's just like, "Nope." The demon keeps pushing, asking why she's so determined to hate them and side with a master who ditched her. He's all, "Why aren't you mad or bitter at the people who left you and rely on your power?" Schnee is so over his bluffing, and honestly, he picked the worst timing ever to try and get under her skin. She whips out her blue moon sword and instantly gives his head a new address, a little bit detached from his body. He's still spouting some nonsense, even as his body and head are literally falling apart. They talk about a dramatic exit. Schnee walks out of the dungeon with Cardinal Greril, plus Tira, Shimmer, and Yuzuha. They head straight to the king's palace. Everyone's probably wondering how she even got into the castle, right? The king immediately asks what she's doing there and how she got into the dungeon. She explains all about the demons and that taboo mind-affecting skill they used on Cardinal Greril. The king's like, "Whoa, so the enemies of humanity, those demons from the history books, are actually back?" The king, queen, and Gadras are super relieved to hear Schnee's awesome news that the two who got teleported are safe. The king says he hopes Cardinal Greril will keep being their go-between with the church. Cardinal Greril apologizes big time and promises to work even harder from now on. Schnee then tells the king he should really try to control information because if word got out about chaos in the castle, it would totally freak out the common people. The king gets it and then asks her what she's gonna do next. She says she's got somewhere to be and bounces out of the palace with her crew. Tira's curious how they're gonna get to the walled city of Valmer, since Shin has their wagon, so she asks Schnee about it. Schnee tells her not to sweat it, they'll just run there, and sure enough, Schnee and Tira leave the castle and sprint all the way to the walled city of Valmer. Tira is basically screaming her head off as her master totally speeds up, even though she's riding on Shimmer's back. Meanwhile, that good-for-nothing Shin asks Ryon what she knows about the Pure Lands. Ryon explains that the Pure Lands are cities that fell during the Disc of Prosperity event, and rumor has it, it takes several chosen ones to take down the monsters that pop up there. Nitwit Shin points out they'll need some kind of weapon, and Ryon mentions she's super glad she got teleported with her boxed skullface sword. Ryon asks foolish Shin what he plans to use for defense, and idiot, pride-filled Shin just smiles with his eyes closed like a wet puppy, trying to scratch an itch. He's thinking to himself that he can't let the princess know how powerful he really is just yet. Shin adds that it might be a struggle even for him while they're trying to find their way out of the Pure Land. These two lost fools are wandering around the Pure Land. Ryon tells the story about this tiny door that's rumored to be the entrance and exit of a new gate. Shin suggests they look for the door instead of just clearing out all the monsters in the Pure Land. Idiotic Shin spots a wall and asks Ryon if she's cool with climbing it. Without even waiting for an answer, dumb butt Shin leaps into the air and then just slowly floats back down to the bottom of the wall. Nimrod Shin tries to leap over the wall again, but the same thing happens. Shin asks Ryon what she saw when he jumped, and Ryon tells him that after Shin jumped in the air, he vanished when he got above the wall and then reappeared on the ground. Shin figures his reappearance has something to do with teleporting right before trying to jump over a lower part of the fence. Shin mentions he knows what's causing the problem. He leads Ryon forward within the Pure Land, and they come across this magic ball of light. Stupid Shin smirks in realization and explains to Ryon that the magic light ball means the entire city is actually a dungeon. Ryon is totally surprised by her knucklehead partner's words and exclaims that she's never heard of a city becoming a dungeon. Shin explains that this city-turned-dungeon works differently from the normal dungeons she's used to, and they can only reach the exit by following a specific set of routes. Ryon brilliantly points out that the reason Shin can't fly over the fence or take a detour is because the route sends anyone who strays right back to where they were before they tried to detour. Shin, with that stupid smirk on his dumb face, adds that they have to follow the magic light balls, deal with lurking traps, and defeat monsters to escape the dungeon. Ryon smiles at her not-so-useless partner and says she's grateful. Shin is her teleported partner. Shin returns the gratitude, and the princess blushes like an idiot. Before taking charge, Ryon tells Shin to let her know about any weird stuff he sees. Shin announces that the magic light ball will teleport them to a new location and volunteers to go first. promising to come back right after confirming the new place is safe. Shin touches the magic light ball, teleports out of the scene, and then swiftly returns, just like he promised. He tells the princess, Ryo, that the new area is safe and not too far from where they are. The princess apologizes for making Shin her guinea pig, and Shin assures her he chose to go because he knows he can escape whatever's on the other side without any hassle. Shin smiles his usual worthless smile, and secretly thinks to himself that he could instantly slaughter any monster in the game world if no one was watching. Ryo promises to repay Shin for his kindness, and these two lost fools teleport through the magic light ball. Shin scans the area and announces there's a monster lurking around. The two buffoons run towards the monster to take it down. When they face the monster, Ryo asks Shin what this ugly and nasty monster is. Shin explains it's a ghost-type monster called a gillyways, and it uses earth and wind magic. Shin warns the princess that the monster's movements are super irregular and unpredictable. The gilly monster literally jumps into the air and totally casts this dust tornado magic on everyone attacking it, and Ryo's all, whoa, the monsters in the Pure Land are seriously awesome. Shin, being the cool guy he is, reassures the princess, don't worry, I got this monster's spell, just try to get a little pinch in. Then, with this super powerful zigzag slash Shin takes the monster down a notch. Ryo jumps down, screaming like a total hype girl, before she slashes the monster in half. Shin just smirks, delivering the final blow. Ryo smiles and asks Shin how they beat the monster in just 3 moves. Shin spills the tea, telling her that the skill-face sword she's using has light magic in it. He also adds that light is a huge weakness for some monsters. Ryo, all happy and bubbly, asks Shin what kind of sword he's got, and he tells her it's called Kakura. After Ryo teases Shin about his secret, super strong sword, these two big goofs just walk right up to them. Ryo asks Shin how many monsters he can sense with his magic way, aka his invisible game-setting device. Shin tells her he can spot 20 monsters, adding that monsters usually don't leave their territory in the dungeon, but they should still totally be careful. After zipping through another magic light ball, Shin and Ryo come face to face with a high-level slime monster. The princess, being a bit overconfident, totally underestimates all the serious warnings Shin tries to give her. She swoops into the sky, ready to unleash her new sword, but the slime, being a sneaky little thing, surprises Ryo by just sliding out of the way of her attack and pinning her down with parts of its gooey self. The slime starts melting the princess's clothes, and Shin, being the hero, dashes in and totally destroys the monster. With this dumb look on his face, Shin foolishly talks about how he got in contact with the slime and how they took it down together. Ryo just smirks and points out to Shin that he's been talking to her way more casually now compared to when they first met. Shin, totally flustered, turns around and tries to avoid her gaze. But the princess asks Shin why he's trying so hard to avoid her. Shin, super embarrassed, points out that a good chunk of her clothes got melted by the slime juices. Ryo squeals and quickly tries to hide herself. Shin, being a gentleman, offers her his jacket and shivers from the cold. Ryo mentions that Shin has a ton of clothing items, and Shin nervously tells her that he was gifted almost all of them, along with his tools. While patrolling the game, Shin asks if Ryo can actually use magic, and Ryo points out that they barely even use magic to fight. Shin fills Shin in on his plan to teach the princess how to use a spell. After the lessons, these two big goofs are walking around the dungeon and stumble upon an egg-shaped monster. Shin points out that the dungeon is acting weird, like it's trying to get rid of them. And the monster egg hatches and instantly transforms into this huge, nasty griffin monster, spitting out a super powerful burst of freezing energy. Shin immediately scoops Ryo up and flies out of there just in the nick of time, before that weird blast gets them. In a secluded area, Ryo asks Shin to put her down before asking what they can even do. Shin tells Ryo to attack from behind while he acts as a decoy. Ryo smiles and asks her, stupid partner, if he's actually going to be able to handle his role. Shin assures the princess that even though he doubts the monster will hit him, if it does, he can totally just take it. With that, Shin starts running and totally distracting the monster. He pulls out a bunch of finger blades and throws them at the monster. While the monster growls up at the sky, Ryo sees an opening and jumps into the air to just repeatedly strike it down. The monster hits Ryo with its wing, and Ryo wonders how strong that wing actually is. Shin calls Ryo's attention into the air, and Ryo watches him. Ryo asks Shin if they're done, and Shin happily tells her that the griffin monster is gone. Suddenly, the monster regenerates, totally surprising them. Shin insists he's sure they defeated it, and Ryo mentions that the monster regenerated 100%. The monster screams into the afternoon air and blesses the two fools with ice-cold breath, and Ryo and Shin just run for their lives. While they're running, Ryo asks Shin what they can do to finally destroy this monster. After thinking hard for a bit, Shin figures something out before asking Ryo to help him with a favor. Ryo exclaims when Shin asks her to find the device to open the gate by herself, but Shin totally ignores her and tells her he'll slow down the monster while Ryo checks out the opening mechanism. When Ryo asks what she has to do with the opening mechanism, Shin points out that the monster's super fast regeneration is probably from magic, and there's probably a spell somewhere regenerating the monster. Ryo adds that the spell must have been hidden in the opening mechanism. Ryo points out that opening the gate could temporarily immobilize the griffin and let them escape. With a stupid smile, Shin mentions that it's pretty common for monsters to want to show off and laugh. With that, Shin flies super high into the sky and inwardly apologizes to Ryo. Shin confesses that it doesn't even matter if there's a spell or not. With Ryo out of the way, Shin unleashes his maximum power and completely destroys the monster in a single slash. But then, the monster's head regenerates, and Shin happily declares his plans to use the monster as a lab rat to see how much power he can release at once. After defeating the regenerated monster for the 30th time, Shin decides to try something different. A white sphere appears in the monster's chest and suddenly starts pulling Shin into it. Shin throws a fire attack, but the sphere in the monster just absorbs it, and Shin gets wrapped in this golden light, breaking free from the creature's compelling force. Shin attacks the dumb giant and realizes it's lost its regenerating abilities. Shin slashes the monster's neck and watches it explode into nothing. Ryo walks into the scene and asks Shin what that explosion was and where the griffin monster went. Shin tells her that he obliterated the monster while she was gone. Outside the dungeon, Shin informs Ryo that they're gonna link up with a friend of his in the next town. Schnee gets a message from Shin saying he'll be camping with the princess for the night. Schnee immediately tells Tira and the mythical animals to start their journey. At night, by a campfire, Shin offers to take the first watch and gives Ryo some tea. Ryo asks Shin how he's so prepared, almost like he planned their night outside. Shin explains that he used to travel with an item box. Ryo looks at Shin with admiration and closes the distance between them. Ryo tries to annoy stupid shit-faced Shin into joining the army, but Shin declines. Ryo points out that it feels refreshing to finally meet someone who speaks bluntly enough to have a fun conversation with. Shin asks Ryo if she has a good relationship with her family, but Ryo admits she doesn't. Shin mentions that he's free to have a nice chat with Ryo whenever, before noticing Ryo has snuggled herself into his arms. The next morning, a whole battalion of skull faces is marching towards the next town, where they're supposed to meet up with Schnee and the others. Ryo wonders why a massive horde of monsters is heading towards the next town, Valmer. She mentions that the monster's actions are like a flood. Confused, Shin asks Ryo what a flood even is. Ryo explains to the immature idiot that a flood is when the magic matter overflowing from a pure land collects enough, transforms, and then releases a ton of monsters. Ryo adds that the Mist Garuda protects the area around the pure land, and Valmer is the only way to avoid the mist. Ryo continues that for the same reason, Valmer is super fortified and acts as a shield against magic floods. Ryo drops some knowledge on dull and useless Shin's brain, telling him there are strong warriors and chosen ones in Valmer, but the city always takes a lot of damage. Ryo looks up in disgust and continues that against a major flood, Valmer might not even stand a chance. Shin foolishly tells himself that he has to ask Schnee to hurry to Valmer. Idiotic Shin dumbly points out like a fool that it'll take a while before the monsters reach Valmer, before telling Ryo that they have to join the Valmer army. At Valmer, Ryo's all, "Yo Shin, how long till these monster hordes crash our party?" And Shin's just like, "Chill, Ryo, probably just a few days till they hit Valmer." Ryo's gotta bounce to meet the local lord, but she tells Shin to hit up the town's adventurers guild, and Shin, being the clueless dude he is, asks what's next. Ryo explains that the guild and army are gonna be key for this huge invasion, and all the chosen ones are gonna link up. At the guild, Shin, still kinda clueless, meets the guild master and spills the tea about the monster flood heading their way. The guild master's like, "Whoa, sounds like you actually saw this thing, Shin." And Shin's all, "You bet, saw a massive amount of gnarly monsters charging towards Valmer near the Pure Land." The guildmaster says if Shin's not BSing, they'll start prepping. Shin then whips out his Moon Sanctum intro card to prove he's for real. He even tells the guildmaster to double check with the local lord if he's still skeptical, since his buddy is literally talking to the lord right now. The guildmaster assures him he trusts him and announces he's declaring a state of emergency. He adds that if Shin's pal actually got an audience with the lord, the army will be on it as soon as possible. The guildmaster continues, saying as soon as they get the green light, they're evacuating everyone. He then turns to his assistant and orders her to hit up all the guild reps. After she dips, the guildmaster asks Shin what he wants to do. Stupid Shin, being the benevolent goofball he is, volunteers to stick around and help the town fight the monsters. The guildmaster thanks him, adding they're kinda short on fighters. Shin then zones out, staring at a signboard in town. Schnee hits him up, letting him know she's almost at Valmer. Shin tells Schnee to tell the guildmaster she wants to join the fight against the flood. Shin asks Schnee about that familiar poster he was staring at, but Schnee's all, "Huh? What poster?" Then Shin bumps into a short blonde elf he totally recognizes as Beret. Beret recognizes Shin too, and the little elf dude just gushes over meeting Shin. Shin admits he never thought he'd run into his friend's side character from the game. Over tea at a cafe, Beret asks Shin if he's gonna join Valmer's army and fight this monster flood. Slow and self-righteous Shin confirms it, adding he just finished chatting with the guildmaster. Beret then asks Shin why he didn't just wipe out the monsters as soon as he found them. Shin explains he was with the second princess of Bear derelict at the time and couldn't go all out with her watching. Beret smiles at Shin's answer and jokes that he can totally see a princess proposing to him. Shin does his usual fake laugh and brags that the second princess is indeed into him, which is why he tried to take out the monsters without using his full power. Beret offers to help Shin whenever he needs him, and Shin suddenly remembers something. He foolishly asks Beret about the signboard he was gawking at in the town square. Beret spills that the signboard belongs to a shop owned by Shin's old friend, Hibinako. Shin's super surprised, asking if Hibinako is still even in the game world. Beret mentions a few of Shin's friends who are in Valmer. Beret continues, saying Shin's friends are out of the city on business right now but are doing fine. Shin admits he thought his friends died in the death game. Beret tells Shin not to be shocked, then mentions he has a list of players in the game world. After Beret shows him the list, Shin points out that every single player on it was connected to him somehow. Beret hands Shin another list, explaining it's a running list of known player killers. And Shin looks at the list and reminds himself that these player killers took out tons of his friends and other people during the death game. Beret explains that when players were first discovered in their world, Schnee was the one who insisted they hunt down player killers right away. Shin admits Schnee never said anything about other players. Beret points out that Schnee not mentioning other players and player killers is a total betrayal. Shin chuckles, like the hypocritical little jerk he is, and Beret adds that supporting characters should never purposely hide important info from their masters. He emphasizes that Schnee must be his follower, but she deserves to be punished for keeping crucial info from him. Shin insists Schnee would never betray him, then has a flashback to when Schnee lied about not knowing about the signboard. Beret then goes against his own words, saying that knowing Schnee's personality, she would never try to hurt Shin by hiding info. Too late, dude. The distrust is already planted. Shin agrees, and says out loud that Schnee would never betray him. Beret announces he needs to start getting ready for the monster flood. When Shin asks Beret if he plans to fight with the army, Beret says no, pointing out that Valmer is safe with Shin around. And while walking in town, Shin tells Schnee that after doing some research on floods, he found out a powerful individual has shown up a few times amidst low-level hordes. Shin points out that the bigger the flood, the more likely they are to appear. Yuzuha suddenly hugs Shin, and Shin asks Tira where Schnee is. The next day, Tira asks her master where she's headed, and she tells her she needs to go meet with the chosen ones at the Lord's castle. Shin points out that Schnee came back in the middle of the night, so he never got to ask her about the player killers and other existing players. Shin has a flashback to when Beret called Schnee a betrayer. The Lord of Valmer welcomes Shin and introduces them to his council. The Lord of Valmer briefs the team on their battle tactics, and Tira feels bad for the knights under Schnee. After waiting for the monsters, none show up, and everyone regroups to talk about this new twist. Schnee points out she's seen situations where monster floods just disappear like that. Schnee adds that after they vanish, the monsters just burst out of nowhere and attack the town. Shin points out that the incident Schnee's talking about is an actual game event. Schnee opens her eyes and adds there's a chance a super powerful individual could be leading such a huge flood, basically the event boss. On their way to the Moon Sanctum, Shin asks Schnee if she used big spells in guild battles when he was gone. Schnee denies it, saying she can handle most stuff with standard area of effect spells. In the Moon Sanctum, Shin forges a massive bow for Tira. While the troops and everyone are waiting for the flood, Schnee tells Shin there's something she wants to talk to him about after the battle. The monsters approach Valmer, and Schnee conjures a blue, huge range magic attack and drops it on them. Tira and Yuzuha praise Schnee, and Ryone orders the soldiers to attack. Shin points out that this isn't just a regular monster flood and asks Schnee to repeat her blue light spell, but Schnee uses their servant master connection to tell Shin she can't spam huge range attacks. And Shin leaps into the sky, wielding his fire sword. The monsters around him burn up as soon as they hit Shin's flames. Before Ryone can lead the army to attack the monsters, Tira shoots an arrow that lands right in the middle of them with a massive explosion. Ryone smirks at Tira's cute celebration and charges into a line of monsters. A huge monster attacks Ryone. When Tira tries to help her, she stumbles and says she used a ton of mana on her attack. Just one shot drained her? What kind of wimpy warrior is that? Yuzuha tries to talk Tira out of shooting another arrow, but Tira insists she has to help Ryone. Just in the nick of time, Wilhelm swoops in and saves Ryone. Tira recognizes Wilhelm, and Lassia greets Tira from behind, offering to recharge her mana. Ryone and Wilhelm team up and take down the giant monster. Ryone thanks Wilhelm for saving her, then asks why he's in Valmer. Wilhelm explains the guild got a request for help. Wilhelm then has a flashback to Marie, begging him to save Shin from the monster and smirks. Shin totally just tanks hits with his full body armor and, punches a monster into the ground like it's made of paper. The guards around him are all, whoa, dude, who even are you? Shin just tells them to call him Red, and then suggests they bounce so he can go full power without holding back. The guards actually run away, totally freaked out, and Shin activates his cursed axe. He starts slicing through a ton of monsters, then spots the big bad event boss. The demon tries to mess with the soldiers' minds, but Shin just cranks up his stats. He jumps super high into the air and takes down the demon with one epic smash of his cursed axe. Then, this totally clueless Schnee goes and tells her dumb master that all the monsters are cleared out, and the town is just like, wait, 0 casualties? Wilhelm and Laisha dip after the fight, but Shin and his girls are stuck for the victory party. At the party, Ryon calls out to Shin, and Schnee asks her master if anything's up between him and Ryon. Shin instantly denies it and gets all awkward around Ryon. Schnee, storms off, totally jealous. Ugh, what a bunch of useless goofs. Shin eventually links up with Schnee. Schnee apologizes for ditching her dork master. Shin asks if she was jealous, and Schnee totally admits it. Schnee then asks Shin if Beret told him about the players and player killers, and Shin says yes. Schnee immediately apologizes for not telling him herself, because she was scared he'd go back to being the old Shin if he knew about other players. Schnee just starts bawling, saying she doesn't know how to go back to her old self. She confesses she just wants to be Shin's rock, and Shin pulls the crying elf into a surprise hug. Shin apologizes too, admitting he would have done the same thing if he was in her shoes. He spills the beans, saying after beating the game boss and coming back to the game world, he felt so lonely until they reunited, and he realized Schnee remembered him. Shin assures Schnee he's not gonna punish her, but he makes her promise to never keep secrets from him again. Schnee then, out of nowhere, asks Shin if he's still in love with Mariano, and Shin tells her he is. Schnee totally ignores his answer and just kisses him. She looks him dead in the eyes and tells him she's not giving up on him and she'll keep loving him even if he finds his way back to his world. Schnee heads back to the party, and the little group enjoys the rest of their evening. The next morning, Shin and the girls leave Valmer for the next town.